Welcome back to the King's Report for May 26th, 2018, Saturday. And this will be our second broadcast for this morning. We have to divide it up into two parts today because we have so much to cover. We've already done the weather, and we've done the weather basically. We've gone through most of the Drudge Report headlines. And I want to go first to this video of Vice President Pence telling pastors to share the gospel. We're not actually going to share the video, but we'll just read through the article. In the last-second surprise appearance before a pastors' conference in Washington, D.C., Vice President Mike Pence outlined how the Trump administration has championed causes important to the evangelical community and implored them to continue to share the good news of Jesus Christ. Wow, could you imagine that happening under Obama administration or Hillary Clinton administration? Yeah, but this happened yesterday in the Trump administration. And he showed up at the last minute at a pastors' conference that was going on in Washington, D.C., and asked them to share the good news of Jesus Christ. And here's what he said, quote, "Other than the service of those who wear the uniform of the United States, especially our cherished fallen, the ministries that you lead and the prayers that you pray are the greatest consequence in the life of the nation," unquote. The vice president told those attending the 2018 Watchmen on the Wall conference sponsored by the Family Research Council. Keep preaching the good news. Keep preaching in season and out of season, as the Bible says. Always be prepared to give a reason for the hope that you have, he continued. At one point, Pence shared his Christian testimony, a life-changing moment that came at a Christian music conference in Wilmore, Kentucky back in 1978 at the end of his freshman year in college. Quote, 40 years ago this spring, I literally walked down and gave my life to Jesus Christ, and so I just want you to continue to share the gospel. Share that life-changing message, he said. As their website states, the Watchmen on the Wall conference, hosted by the Family Research Council, has a spiritual mission, which is the belief that the problems facing America, quote, ultimately require a spiritual solution administered by spiritual leadership. That is why we are championing pastors to transform America. The conference was held at the Hyatt Regency Capitol Hill in D.C., and besides hearing from guest speakers, pastors also receive briefings on ways to mobilize their congregations on the political, cultural, and moral issues of the day, along with tours that detail America's Judeo-Christian heritage. While the vice president's message had a spiritual tone, it also had a practical one, focusing on what the Trump administration has accomplished so far. Pence spoke of the record amount of judges President Trump has placed in the judicial branch and his bold decisions to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He received multiple standing ovations from the evangelical crowd, especially when Pence declared how President Trump is the, quote, most pro-life president in American history, standing without apology for the unborn and the sanctity of life. That's President Donald Trump, unquote. On the topic of religious liberty, Pence made clear that the Johnson Amendment, which puts certain restrictions on pastors when it comes to political involvement, is being done away with. Quote, "We are going to fight until we fully repeal the Johnson Amendment from the Internal Revenue Code, but it will no longer be enforced under this administration," unquote, Pence said. The Johnson Amendment will no longer be enforced under this administration. Johnson Amendment, of course, is the amendment that that is named after Lyndon B. Johnson, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was the president after John F. Kennedy, and when he was before he was vice president under Kennedy, he was a senator. In fact, he was, I believe, the majority leader of the Senate. And he's from Texas, and he had a problem. These churches in Texas were speaking out against him and criticizing him. And so he created this amendment to the Internal Revenue Code, which on the one hand gave, so the Internal Revenue Code on the one hand gave the 501c3 status to religious organizations and churches, meaning that the contributions by members could be deducted from the members' income when they itemize their deductions on the tax returns. and also that the revenue of the church was tax-free, would not be taxed. On the other hand, so while doing that, on the other hand, this Johnson Amendment forbids or does not allow pastors or churches to speak out politically. And of course, it's been ignored pretty much, especially by the Democrats. Democratic-leaning churches have supported Democratic candidates for a long, long time. But it's good to see that under the current Trump administration, this will no longer be enforced. It's been selectively enforced, I would say, in the past against those who support conservative candidates. So that is good news for, at least during the Trump administration, that is good news for conservative churches. But if it is not repealed before the next president comes along, and especially if the next president is a liberal president, someone like Bernie Sanders, Oprah Winfrey, or who else is running? Michelle Obama. Then you could bet that Johnson Amendment will be very strictly enforced, and perhaps even statements being made now will be called to account by such an administration. So it's important that the Republicans repeal that Johnson Amendment before they lose control of the House, Senate, and presidency. We were expecting it to be in the in the omnibus spending bill, because a lot of other stuff was, but that was taken out at I think pretty much at the last minute. It was taken out. Not so good. All right, let's go on to something else now. Here, let's go on to see what is going on in Brazil. In Brazil, the situation there is dire and getting worse, where they have a truckers' strike, and that is basically shutting down the country. Because in the modern days, basically countries run on trucks, don't they? Everything gets transported from one place to another, whether it's food or daily necessities or clothing or anything, building materials, anything. This is an article in The Guardian. A Brazilian president sends in army as truck protest paralyzes country. Sao Paulo, the biggest city in South America, in state of emergency over fuel shortages while markets run out of food. Earlier I said that it was Rio de Janeiro, but it's Sao Paulo. I didn't realize that Sao Paulo was bigger than Rio de Janeiro. Brazil's conservative president, Michel Temer, Michel, I guess you pronounce that? Anyway, I don't know how to pronounce it in Portuguese, has ordered army and federal police to clear highways blockaded by striking truck drivers after a protest over soaring fuel prices entered its fifth day. The blockades have paralyzed much of the country's economy and prompted Sao Paulo, the biggest city in South America, to declare a state of emergency over fuel shortages. Quote, I have actioned the federal security force to unblock highways, and I am asking governors to do the same, unquote, Temer said in a televised address on Friday. We will not let the population do without its primary needs. The protests began over fuel prices, but have been further stoked by widespread anger over repeated graft scandals involving prominent politicians, including Temer himself. In Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, supermarkets and restaurants are running low on supplies. Some factories have shut down, bus services have been reduced, and even the Refugees World Cup, scheduled to take place in Sao Paulo on Saturday, has been canceled. I'm not sure what that is, Refugees World Cup. The Folha de São Paulo newspaper reported that 11 airports, including one in the capital city, Brasilia, have run out of fuel, and long queues have built up at gas stations around the country. Behind the scenes, the army, already embroiled in a controversial operation against gang violence in Rio de Janeiro estate, is concerned it might not have enough fuel to break up the strike, the G1 News site reported. It is a difficult, delicate mission, said Reserve General Augusto Heleno Pereira, who commanded Brazil's UN military force in Haiti. The truck driver is a sympathetic figure. We hope there will be a negotiation and there will be a deal, and that they won't offer resistance. The government appeared to believe it had resolved the crisis, but many drivers were unsatisfied with the deal. One of the main unions, known in Portuguese as ABCAM, and representing 600,000 truck drivers, walked out of the negotiations. "We will not go back to work until our demands are met," said one truck driver, Jose Cicero Rodriguez, speaking by telephone from a protest at Santos, Brazil's biggest port near Sao Paulo. Brazil's federal highway police said that highways continued to be blocked on Friday, but would not confirm how many. Local media reported that security forces will be able to enter trucks and remove them from the highways, and the decree is due to come into effect on Friday. Following Temer's decree, the ABCAM union said it was telling its members to stop blocking highways, but continue demonstrating peacefully. "We have already shown our strength to the government," the union said in a statement on its website. Ahead of yesterday's agreement, Brazilian media reported that some congressmen were fleeing Brasilia to return to their home states before the fuel ran out. Eunicio Oliveira, the state president who flew back to his home state of Ceará in the northeast, was forced to fly straight back to Brasilia after a wave of criticism. Videos circulating on WhatsApp showed truck drivers enjoying barbecues on blocked highways and pictures of trucks covered in Brazil flags and banners reading "Stop with the thieving or we'll stop the country." On Friday, striking school bus drivers paraded down Sao Paulo's landmark Paulista Avenue in a cacophony of blaring horns. Drivers drew a direct link between their own increased fuel costs and the vast sums of money that politicians of all parties have been accused of stealing. "Nobody can stand anymore. This is absurd. So much stealing, so much thieving, and we have to pay the bill," said Anderson Barbosa, 41. "Brazil is indignant." All right. So that is the situation in Brazil there. Drudge has a couple of other headlines on that. The gas stations are deserted, and Sao Paulo declares a state of emergency. See where that. You have to see where that goes. I guess today they will be clearing the highways, and I hope that does not lead to violence, or that people will not be hurt. There's an abortion ban repeal. It's a plebiscite going on in Ireland right now, and we're expecting that the forces that have been backed by George Soros to repeal the abortion ban in Ireland will be winning this vote by a large margin. At least that is what is expected by the news media that is reporting on this. This is an AFP article out of Dublin. Ireland voted overwhelmingly to liberalize some of the strictest abortion laws in Europe on Friday, according to exit polls in a historic referendum in the traditionally Catholic country. The vote to repeal a constitutional ban on terminations, except in cases where the mother's life is in danger, was predicted to win by a 2/3 majority. An Irish Times poll of 4,000 said the yes camp was leading by 68% to 32%. Another poll by national broadcaster RTE suggested an even bigger victory, with a 69% to 30% backing reforms. The Irish Times survey suggested that women voted by 70% in favor of the proposal and 30% against. Support among men was 65% pro-choice and 35% anti-abortion. That's an interesting choice of words by this writer, isn't it? They use pro-choice, then anti-abortion, rather than saying pro-life. Thank you to everyone who voted today. Democracy in action. It's looking like we will make history tomorrow, Prime Minister Leo Varadkar said, who backs the reform, said in a tweet. Well, that is democracy, unfortunately. Under the Trinity Constitution, this kind of constitutional amendment would not be possible. And that's why it's important that the Constitution not be amendable. You get a Constitution that is from God, is from True Father through the second king. And then that constitution, the provisions of that constitution become eternal. Because in democracy, you find that the over time, these constitutional amendments degrade the integrity of the Constitution. The same has happened to a large extent in the U.S. Constitution, where in the beginning, when the Constitution was being created, the issue of slavery was not dealt with, and this had to be dealt with some decades later, some 80 years, 70 or 80 years later. And as a result, of course, that amendment was necessary. Those amendments were necessary, but the amendments that followed, though, have largely been unnecessary. And so the Chonryuk Constitution seeks to go back to the original founding spirit of America, minus the slavery, and to put that in stone so that it continues eternally. The Washington Post said that the Chonryuk Constitution is a powerful document. This was in the article that was published. I believe it was published on Wednesday. It was published online on Wednesday. We know that for sure. It may have been published in the style section, but one of the sentences in there says that the Chonryuk Constitution is a powerful document. And it also says that the Constitution puts the country in reverse and steps on the gas or something like that. But what it means is that, what it's saying is that we're doing what Father has said, which is that the United States Constitution needs to be rewritten, and it needs to be, and the United States needs to go back to its original founding spirit. And that founding spirit was one of freedom and responsibility. That is what the Chonryuk Constitution reflects. So this kind of amendment to the Constitution, or repealing of abortion ban in the Constitution of Chonryuk, would not happen. In Chonryuk Constitution, unborn children have as much human rights as people who have been born. I think it was President Reagan, wasn't it, said that, I noticed that he said something to the effect that he notices that people who are in favor of abortion, all of them have already been born. So they're not affected by this kind of a move to liberalize abortion. Let's see. People over 65, however, voted mostly against the change. Among the youngest voters, 18 to 24-year-olds, the poll found 87% had voted to allow abortion, according to the poll. Nearly 3.5 million voters asked whether they wanted to overturn the ban after an emotional and divisive campaign. And people arriving at poll stations from the early morning spoke about the momentousness of a complex decision that in many cases pitted moral against religious beliefs. Chris Garvin, a 20-year-old worker in human resources in Dublin, said it's a very, very important matter, and I think it's going to affect everybody's lives in some way. Ireland has traditionally been one of the most religious countries in Europe. However, the Roman Catholic Church's influence has waned in recent years following a series of child sex abuse scandals. The referendum came 3 months before a visit by Pope Francis for the World Meeting of Families, and 3 years after Ireland voted to legalize same-sex marriage despite the Church's opposition. The fact that it's illegal for someone in Ireland to seek medical treatment, having to travel outside the country and to feel that guilt, shame, and isolation, it's absolutely shocking, said Belinda Nugent, 43, a community activist voting in North Dublin. I took it really personally, this vote. But across the city, Finbar O'Regan, 50, said he wanted a good, strong no vote. The unemployed Dublin voter said his mother had been sent to England to have him born and adopted. I'm a staunch no. It's the life of an unborn baby. I'm one of the lucky ones, he said. I'm very emotional. The count begins at 9 a.m. or 0800 GMT on Saturday. So the count will begin in a couple of hours or 2.5 hours. 0800 GMT. That would be, so it's already begun. Okay, so 0800 GMT would be, I think, about 3 a.m. here, or since we're on daylight time now, 4 a.m. I guess now. So I guess, okay, so it's already been going on for about an hour and a half, with the result expected to be announced at Dublin Castle later in the day. A Dublin voter, Helen, 47, who did not want to give her surname, said, "I've been awake all night. I'm very emotional about this. We've been marching about this for years and desperately trying to get successive governments to do something. Hopefully our day has come," she said, outside a polling station opposite Dublin's cathedral. Lawyer Rachel Cadden went to vote with her husband near the Dublin docks. "I'm pregnant, so it's especially important for us," the 30-year-old said. "It means I can get the proper medical care that I should get, and that my needs are put first whenever it comes to me being in the hospital." So it sounds like she's voting yes so that she can get an abortion, so that she can abort the baby that is in her womb right now. That's really tragic. At present, Ireland's Eighth Amendment, which could be repealed in the vote, recognizes the right to life of the unborn with an equal right to life of the mother. But in the small town of Kilcullen, some 50 kilometers southwest of Dublin, voter Sean Murphy told AFP, "I don't see any reason to change from the position we are in at the moment." Canvassers were out on the streets holding up signs and wearing T-shirts. One in southwest Dublin offered hugs to people who voted in favor of repealing the ban. The Eighth Amendment to the Irish Constitution was installed following a 1983 referendum which approved outlawing abortion. Anyone terminating a pregnancy in Ireland could face 14 years in jail. The ban has led to thousands of women traveling each year to neighboring Britain, where terminations are legal, or increasingly turning to abortion pills sold online. Since 1983, around 170,000 Irish women have gone abroad for terminations. The law was tweaked in 2013 to allow terminations if the mother's life is at risk. The Irish government has proposed that if the Eighth Amendment is repealed, abortion will be allowed up to 12 weeks and between 12 and 24 weeks in exceptional circumstances. Well, up to 12 weeks is a lot stricter than what it is in the United States today. I think in U.S. today, 27 weeks, I think it is? Up to 27 weeks, I believe. And some states are trying to change that to 24 weeks, I believe. But here in Ireland, it says even if this yes vote wins, still 12 weeks will be the deadline. Will be allowed up to 12 weeks. And between 12 and 24 weeks in exceptional circumstances. Not sure what exceptional means, but I'm sure that they will figure that out. But it's a terrible tragedy. It's and this is, as it says, the cause of this is the waning influence of the Catholic Church. And so, of course, the Catholic Church is losing its influence because it has gone off track of Christ's message. Evangelical Christianity and True Father's message, and needs to get into Ireland and into other countries that are traditionally Catholic, so that when people are driven, I would say, to re-examine their faith by these scandals in the Catholic Church, the pedophilia scandals, I'm sure there will be more coming, because they keep coming and coming and coming. And there will be other types of scandals too. There will be financial scandals, I'm sure, and now that the Pope has said, "Oh, homosexuality is okay. That's how God made you," Catholic Church has really just become just a relativist blob. I remember when I was growing up in the Methodist Church, I used to attend some conferences with my parents and so forth. And I remember one time, it's funny how you remember these things from childhood, but at one conference, someone was sort of jokingly, or half jokingly, I would say, saying that, well, a Methodist is anyone who will hold up his hand and say so. Anyone who says, "I'm a Methodist," that's a Methodist, showing how relativist Methodist Church had become at that time. And the Catholic Church is definitely pretty much the same now. I mean, what does it mean to be a Catholic? What does it mean to be a Catholic? It's become so relativized that it means almost nothing. anyone who wants to claim to be a Catholic pretty much can be a Catholic these days, I would say. If you're homosexual, if you're a pedophile, any other thing, you can always say, yeah, well, I'm sure if I talk to the Pope, he'll say that God made me this way, and so the Catholic Church has to recognize me. If I'm a radical Islamic jihadist, But this is the time of judgment. This is the time of judgment, and people need to seek the true Word of God, the true Word of God. How do you like my stand, by the way, my presentation stand? It's not an expensive one. It's a very cheap one, as a matter of fact, but I got it online, and so that my rod of iron can be presented in a proper way. Yeah. I think in the future, I'll be improving this as the Elder Kingdom develops, but step by step, baby steps. Let's see. I wanted to do this article on foreign hackers compromise routers because this affects a lot of us. It affects our home for sure, and it probably affects the majority of your homes. If you have a Wi-Fi in your home, this is going to affect you. A Reuters story. The FBI warned on Friday that Russian computer hackers had compromised hundreds of thousands of home and office routers and could collect user information or shut down network traffic. Yeah. So, these hackers could have been in our routers, my router, without my knowing it. And so what are we going to do about it? Well, the U.S. law enforcement agency urged the owners of many brands of routers to turn them off and on again and download updates from the manufacturer to protect themselves. The warning followed a court order Wednesday that allowed the FBI to seize a website that the hackers planned to use to give instructions to the routers. Though that cut off malicious communications, it still left the routers infected, and Friday's warning was aimed at cleaning up those machines. Infections were detected in more than 50 countries, though the primary target for further action was probably Ukraine, the site of many recent infections and a long-time cyber warfare battleground. In obtaining the court order, the Justice Department said the hackers involved were in a group called Sofasy, I guess you pronounce that answered to the Russian government. Sofasy, also known as APT-28 and Fancy Bear, has been blamed for many of the most dramatic Russian hacks, including that of the Democratic National Committee during the 2016 U.S. presidential campaign. Earlier, Cisco Systems, Inc. said the hacking campaign targeted devices from Belkin International's Linksys, MikroTik, Netgear, Inc., TP-Link, and QNAP. Wow. Yeah, a number of those sound familiar, huh? Linksys, Netgear, TP-Link, those are particularly familiar, aren't they? An FBI official told Reuters that the kinds of devices known to be affected by the hack were purchased by users at electronic stores or online. However, the FBI was not ruling out the possibility that routers provided to customers by Internet service companies also could be affected, the official added. Cisco shared the technical details of its investigation with the U.S. and Ukrainian governments. Western experts say Russia has conducted a series of attacks against companies in Ukraine for more than a year amid armed hostilities between the two countries, causing hundreds of millions of dollars in damages and at least one electricity blackout. The Kremlin on Thursday denied the Ukrainian government's accusation that Russia was planning a cyber attack on Ukrainian state bodies and private companies ahead of the Champions League soccer final in Kiev on Saturday. The size and scope of the infrastructure by VPN filter malware is significant, the FBI said, adding that it is capable of rendering people's routers inoperable. It said the malware is hard to detect due to encryption and other tactics. The FBI urged people to reboot their devices to temporarily disrupt the malware and help identify infected devices. People should also consider disabling remote management settings, changing passwords, and upgrading to the latest firmware. All right, so reboot your routers right after the King's Report, all right? But I think, rebooting those routers just in case may be a good thing to do. All right, let's take a break right now, and we'll be back in a minute or so after this.
wasn't that fun shooting this Tommy gun today?
It's always fun shooting Tommy guns. This one especially. It's just absolutely gorgeous.
All polished and chromed up. It really looks like $1 million.
Yeah. Elliot Ness would have loved one of those.
Yeah, and it's available right now in your favorite dealer, and you go pick one up.
Yeah. Just have him call your distributor.
I mean, the gun, was initially made way back when, back in the 27 is this one.
Yeah. Model 27.
I was surprised by how quick it knocked down those plates.
Oh, 3.5 second run. Under 3.5 second run, knocking down a plate right. 341.
I mean, the gun is heavy. It's about, 12, 14 pounds, especially with this drum, but it's surprising how quick you can go with it. It would actually make quite a good self-defense rifle at home.
If I climbed in somebody's window and they were aiming that at me, I think I'd get out of there real quick. So
that sounds about right to me.
Just the intimidation factor alone.
Fire!
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, May 26th, 2018. Tim Elder sitting in for the second King of Cheongguk, Kyung Jin Moon. And it turns out that Planned Parenthood is upset. It's upset that pro-life groups are eligible for Title X funds, that is, government funds, federal government funds. Planned Parenthood Federation of America is not happy that President Donald Trump's proposed rule to cut off Title X federal family planning funds from abortion providers makes the money available to organizations that fight for the rights of unborn children and faith-based groups. National Public Radio reported about Trump's proposed rule and how it could pave the way for a host of previously ineligible organizations, some of which oppose contraception, to receive funds through the federal government's family planning program. It also removes a requirement that recipients offer medically approved family planning services, and it states explicitly that recipients would not have to provide all forms of effective contraception approved by the Federal Food and Drug Administration, NPR reported. Under Trump's proposed rule, Health and Human Services would no longer provide Planned Parenthood with a huge chunk of those funds, as much as $60 million of the $287 million of the Title X budget, the Federalist reported. In its annual report for the year ending June 30, 2017, Planned Parenthood affiliates performed 321,384 abortions, not including providing drugs that cause unborn babies to be aborted. Calling pro-abortion critics of pro-life organizations reproductive rights advocates, NPR asked Planned Parenthood and the Center for Reproductive Rights to weigh in. So NPR reported the following. This is from the NPR. That's a very progressive, or I don't even like the word progressive, very leftist media organization. And leftist and elitist, I would say. That's a bad combination. Emily Stewart, a vice president of public policy at Planned Parenthood, said in a conference call with reporters that the administration's proposal would, quote, undermine access to contraception, unquote, and bring organizations into the Title X program who don't even believe in birth control. Wow. We have limited federal dollars for health care generally and limited federal dollars for family planning, Nancy Northrup of the Center for Reproductive Rights told NPR. They should go to programs that have a full range of planning, that are scientifically based, and that women are making the decisions based on their full range of options. In fact, pregnancy resource centers, nonprofits across the country that help women facing unplanned pregnancies arrange for adoption or help them pre- and postnatal with a range of services and resources, and the Source of Abortion Advocates, IRE, have saved millions of lives. Pregnancy resource centers have saved millions of lives. And pro-life Republicans have also worked to defund Planned Parenthood or of other federal funds, instead preferring to direct money to publicly funded health clinics that don't perform abortions and offer a full range of health services. The National Catholic Register reported last year, according to the Charlotte Lozier Institute, the research arm of the Susan B. Anthony list. Such health centers are publicly funded and exist in all 50 states, almost 10,000 in total, compared to around 650 Planned Parenthood facilities nationwide. The health centers serve more than 24 million people in 2015, while Planned Parenthood says it serves around 2.5 million per year. The health centers do not perform abortions, but they do provide services like prenatal and perinatal care, diabetes screening, pap smears, checkups, and mammograms, something Planned Parenthood President Cecil Richards has admitted her centers do not provide, despite claims that they do. Planned Parenthood only provides referrals for mammograms, not the procedures themselves. NPR talked to several groups that are considering or want to apply for federal dollars to help with their mission, including Aim for Success, a Texas-based nonprofit that provides abstinence education, the Catholic Medical Association, and the Couple-to-Couple League, a Catholic organization that promotes natural family planning methods and abstinence until marriage. So Planned Parenthood is upset that President Trump is protecting the lives of unborn children, cutting into their business, cutting into their organ harvesting business, their baby parts harvesting business. It's a terrible organization. Murder is their business. Let's look at this. If the tech team can bring up that photograph of Hillary Clinton on the Drudge Report. Something strange is going on here, definitely. See what you think. She's wearing this heavy overcoat with a scarf when the temperature outside is definitely not heavy overcoat weather. Can you show that? Hillary Clinton dons heavy coat and scarf in sweltering 90-degree Boston heat. I mean, the kid that shot up the school in Santa Fe, Texas, was wearing a trench coat in 90-degree heat, right? So what is Hillary Clinton doing? Is she hiding a shotgun or something under this coat? This is definitely very strange. This is definitely not 90-degree weather clothing. Now that we're heading into the summer months, it's obvious Hillary is hiding something with her bulky clothing. Hillary Clinton has been spotted many times recently wearing a heavy coat and scarf strategically placed to hide what appears to be a back brace. So what is wrong with Hillary? One of the comments says maybe she has a stack of emails taped to her body. Or the missing DNC server, perhaps. People are having fun with that. Yeah, but something's definitely going on with that. Let's. I'd like to cover something on. Let's see, we have 4 minutes left. Let's do something on North Korea before we break for the hour and then go into our REMA at the top of the hour. But on North Korea, President Trump is saying that the summit may be on. In fact, it may still be on for the 12th of June, but we'll have to see. But I think he's doing a good job, though, because North Korea is usually the one that sort of tries to gain the upper hand through these moves of, not showing up and making demands, and then doing their charm offensive, then doing their what shall I call it, antagonist offensive. And Trump just said, "Hey, I'm not going to play your game. You don't show up for the preparation meeting? All right, forget it. I'm busy." This is in, Fox, an aging North Korean nuclear strategist involved in now dormant disarmament deals, his former interpreter in international negotiations, who is now North Korea's highest-ranking female diplomat. Kim Gae-kwan and Choi Son-hee are among the best-known North Korean officials after leader Kim Jong-un and his family members. They are in the news again now after their recent back-to-back comments about the United States were blamed for President Donald Trump's abrupt cancellation on Thursday of a much-anticipated summit with Kim Jong-un. On Friday, Trump said the two sides were working to put the meeting back on track. A look at who the officials are and how their comments led Trump to spike the comment planned for June 12th in Singapore. So they look at those two officials. Kim Gae-kwan, he's the first vice foreign minister, 75 years old, and he led the North Korean delegation at much of the off and on six-nation nuclear disarmament talks held in Beijing in 2003 to 2008. And the six-party talks were, that was just an example of how North Korea used the talks to buy time to develop their missiles and their nuclear weapons even further. Under the agreements reached in the negotiations, North Korea halted atomic activities and disabled key elements of its weapons program in return for security guarantees, shipments of fuel, and other aid. Yeah, other aid means $1.3 billion they got. But the deals eventually collapsed amid disputes over how to verify the North's disarmament steps. Criticism subsequently flared in Washington, Seoul, and elsewhere that the deals only benefited North Korea. That's right. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice. But in the case of North Korea, it's not just twice, but 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. And finally, getting to President Trump saying, hey, no more. So on May 16th, he issued a statement threatening to scuttle the Kim-Trump summit to protest what he called Washington's push for one-sided disarmament. That tossed the fuel of skepticism in the U.S. about whether North Korea truly intends to deal away its nuclear program, which, of course, I can tell you, it does not. All right, and talks about Choi Son-hee. All right, let's take a break, and we'll come back after 5 minutes with our REMAs for this morning.
If not us, tell me who will be like Jesus, to the least of these. Boys become kings, girls will be queens, wrapped in your majesty. When we love. Little hands, shoeless feet, lonely eyes looking back at me. Will we leave behind the innocent to grieve? On their own, on the run, when their lives have only begun. These could be our daughters and our sons. And just like a drum, I can hear their hearts beating. I know my God won't let them be defeated. Every child has a dream to belong and be loved. Boys become kings, girls will be queens, wrapped in your majesty. When we love the least of these, then they will be brave and free. Shout your name in victory. When we love the least of these. When we love the least of these. Break our hearts once again. Help us to remember when we were only children hoping for a friend. Won't you look around? These are the lives that the world has forgotten, waiting for doors of our hearts and our homes to open. Boys become kings, girls will be queens, wrapped in your majesty. When we love the least of these, then they will be brave and free. Shout your name in victory. When we love the least of these. When we love the least of these. If not us, who will be like Jesus?
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
And welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, May 26th, 2018. Tim Elder sitting in for the second King of Cheongguk, Hyungjin Moon. For our Rima this morning, I'm turning to Hebrews chapter 6, verses 4 through 6. The King's James, this is NIV, isn't it? Let me take a minute here to switch to the King James. Excuse me, I had the wrong version up here. Okay. Okay, now we have it. All right. 4 through 6. For it is impossible for those who were once enlightened and have tasted of the heavenly gift and were made partakers of the Holy Ghost and have tasted the good word of God and the powers of the world to come, if they shall fall away, to renew them again unto repentance, seeing they crucify to themselves the Son of God afresh, and put him to an open shame. So this is talking about people who come to the Word, come to God, and then fall away. they come and they experience heavenly gift, to be partakers of the Holy Ghost and taste the good word of God and the powers of the world to come. And if they fall away, then for them to renew them again to in repentance. And here the author of Hebrews is saying it is impossible. Well, I like to believe that with the grace of God, it is possible for them to come back to repent. And I believe that everyone has that opportunity, but they come back with a lot less power for the Spirit. That is true, because over the years I've seen many people come to the Unification Church and then leave, and I've been sort of in some loose contact with some people. For example, the gentleman who gave me my first Divine Principle lecture and later left the church, and I see his post now on Facebook, and he's sort of loosely connected to Father, I would say very, very loosely. You can see a desire there, though, to maintain some kind of a connection. But he was a very powerful, and powerful by powerful I mean spiritually powerful. He had a tremendous, he gave the lecture that made me join the church. So, yeah, it was pretty powerful. His lectures are very powerful. But he doesn't have that kind of spiritual power today. And I would say that he has not been brought back to repentance. And even if he were, he would not have that same level of power that the power of the Holy Spirit that he had back then. And other people as well, they choose to leave Father, but they always want to maintain, not always, but many times want to maintain some kind of a connection. And of course, from their personal point of view, it's always better. It's always the better choice to choose to come back to Father. It's always the better choice. It's always the wiser choice, because there's always a way back to Father. There's always a way back to God. God is not going to leave any of his children God is the ultimate no man left behind person. That he will always do everything he can to bring his children back to him and cut them away from Satan. Certainly we want to cut down Satan's power, and we can only do that by cutting away at his at the people who serve him, the people who work with him, and that has to be done one by one. But now that Family Federation has fallen away from Father, the King is choosing to focus his efforts on what he calls the Second Amendment Christians, Christians who understand the value of freedom and understand the importance of guns, but not just guns, but also knives. Understand the importance of self-defense, and the reason he's doing it is because he finds that these Christians, these Christians are, and not just the Christians, but also even the non-Christians in that group, are very honorable, honest, have a very high level of integrity, and are the kinds of people that Father was seeking when he was preaching his message through his physical body. And so that's why that's one reason I imagine that the King was strongly inspired by Father to attend the NRA convention this year in Dallas, Texas, and already he's making preparations for the NRA convention in Indianapolis next year, and also next weekend, a week from today, or actually a week from yesterday, he will be attending the the Blade Show in Atlanta, Georgia, where he will again be making contacts with these Christians. He's not going there to sell anything. He's not going there. He does do some purchasing there, but he's going there mostly to connect with the people in this community, the leaders in this community, because they are the people that the Father wants to connect with. These are the people that have been prepared to receive Father. So this is an entirely new target audience. And this is necessary because the old target audience, the Family Federation, has fallen away. And even if they come back, they will be at the end of the line. The King has told us that even if these senior Koreans come back now, they will be sitting in the back row in our sanctuary, and we will be sitting in the front rows. Those people that you saw sitting in the front rows of Father's events, looking very proud, looking very entitled to that seat. One time I remember, those people will be in the back row. Let me finish that sentence. But I was just remembering one time when a certain man was relieved of his responsibilities in Korea. And he was one of the people who was sitting in the front row of Father's events. And so the next event, he goes up to the front row. And guess what? There's no seat for him. And I remember the look on his face. He didn't mind getting fired so much as not having that seat. That was the ultimate. It's like taking away the company car or something like that. Not having not being able to sit in the front row, having to sit back in the second or third row. Wow, that was the ultimate humiliation. So he was walking back and forth for a while, sort of looking at the people in the front seat, expecting someone to get up and offer him their seat, but no one offered him their seat. You're out of here, kid. That was the ultimate humiliation for him. The people, who sat in those front seats at Father's events, they felt very entitled and they felt very proud, and they were frankly arrogant about that, because it was a kind of a privilege. Oh yeah, I have to sit here because Father may call on me. Father may look for me. This kind of an attitude, and in some cases it's right, but some cases they were right, but in many cases they were just there because they felt entitled. I'm a continental director, so I have to sit in the front. This kind of thing. Anyway, so those people will be sitting in the back. They'll be lucky if they can get a seat in the very back. So if they shall fall away, to renew them again to repentance, seeing they crucify to themselves the Son of God afresh. They crucify the Son of God afresh. They crucified Jesus again, Hebrews is saying. And the same thing with these people who have fallen away. They crucify Father when they fall away. Anyone can repent and come back, but not to the same position. Because that position has been filled by someone else. And same with Hak Jahan. She can repent. She can repent. She can come back to Father as an individual. But she will not be the true mother because that position has been filled. She can repent, but she crucified Father by turning away from him, by betraying him. So if she comes back, she will be the physical mother of our second king. The king once said that he has never eaten a meal cooked by his own mother. So she can come back and she can cook a meal for him. But that's about all she can do. as an as an individual fallen human being, because she is now fallen, as an individual fallen human being, she needs to repent and seek God's grace and come to Him in humility, in complete humility. And as an individual, she can do that. But she will never be true mother. Again, because that position has been taken. Just as, and this is the same thing that happened with, my first lecturer. When he left, someone else took his position. And even if he comes back, he cannot return to that original position because, as I say, he no longer has that power of the Holy Spirit in him. In others, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Those who leave and come back, they can come back in humility and in repentance, but they will no longer have the power of the Spirit that they had when they were first brought to the truth by God. All right, let's go to our Rima for in the Cheonsongyong. I'm on page 1232. I'm in the book on sin and restoration through indemnity. In the very last page of that book, I believe this is chapter 4 of that book, yes. 1232 in the E-edition, English edition that I have here before me. Words spoken in 1987 by Father. A true filial son is one who obeys. A true loyal subject, even when being chased and put to death by traitors, never calls his king incapable. A true loyal subject is a person of integrity and loyalty who sheds tears with a sorrowful heart and wishes his king a long life, even when persecuted by treacherous courtiers to the point of death. This is absolute obedience. The only way to bring about success through absolute obedience is the way of true love. In Korean, there are some words that it's important, I think, for everyone to learn. And one of those words is chungshin. This is a word that is in the family pledge. And we translate this, it has been translated in the English translation of the family pledge as patriot. This is in the second stanza of the family pledge. Chungshin, but literally it means loyal subject. And so here also, that same word chungshin is translated as a loyal subject. And this is part of the problem we have with translation, that the same word of Korean, same Korean word is translated differently in different contexts. And so people are not able to make the connection from one to the other. So here, for example, Father's talking about chungshin, but people who read this in English and where it says loyal subject are not able to realize immediately that he's talking about the same chungshin that is mentioned in the family pledge, because there it's translated differently. It's translated a patriot. And, neither translation is wrong. It's just that there's a value in consistency. Anyway, also there's a value in learning Korean. So anyway, where am I? Okay. And another word that would be important for people to learn is the opposite of chungshin. The opposite of the loyal subject is kanshin. And this is a word that this particular combination of Chinese characters is not often used in Japanese. At least I didn't learn it when I was studying in Japan. Perhaps it was taught later. But it is the opposite of loyal subject. And here, in this passage, it's translated as treacherous courtier. Is that right? Traitors or traitor. It's translated two different ways, even in the same paragraph. Traitors, or by treacherous courtiers. Is that one? Let me check the 한신으로 몰려서 죽더라도. 한신으로 몰려서 죽더라도. Okay. Well, so yeah, it's translated two different ways in the same paragraph. And it's a treacherous subject. So it's someone who, but more than that, it's not just treachery, it's not just traitor, but it's someone who basically flatters the king, manipulates the king, through flattery mostly. Oh, you're a great, oh, you are the sun god, or whatever, so the flatters the king in order to manipulate him into, so as to serve their own interests. And this is, as I understand, the definition of a kansin. So it can be a treacherous subject, it can be a traitor, but it's someone who manipulates the king, or manipulates his able figure, as you would say, or his supervisor, or whoever, in order to serve his own interests, in order for himself to get ahead, for example, to be promoted to a higher position, this kind of a thing. So given those sort of translation notes, I want to think about the meaning of this, what it means, what I'm inspired by this. A true filial son is one who obeys. And the second king is a true filial son by this standard, because he obeys his father. He obeys his father. The Family Federation is saying that he is unfilial because he disobeyed his mother. But always, 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 the true parent is true father. True father, Sun Myung Moon, is the true parent. And it is the second king's responsibility to obey his father. And they will say, oh, but he is one with mother, and so he is in her. Da, 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 da. By her actions, she has proven that is not true. As I think Richard Panzer has pointed out, in order to believe that father and mother are one, you would have to say that when father went to spirit world, he came to all sorts of realizations that everything that he had done in the past was wrong. That he should not have designated these 8 great textbooks, that he should not have chosen Hyungjinim as his heir, he should not have, the divine principle was wrong, and it needs to be corrected. To accept their premise that father and mother are one, you have to accept logically, you would have to accept that when father got to spirit world, he looked around and said, wow, I really goofed up. I got a lot of things wrong, and I got to work through my wife to correct those things. But of course, that's ridiculous to say that. Why? For one thing, father was in spirit world even while he was in his physical body. He was working in spirit world even while he was in physical body. All right. When he took off his physical body, like we might take off an old winter coat, he did not suddenly come into a new reality. He was in that reality of the spirit world all along. So it is completely wrong to suggest that father came into some new realizations about his mission once he entered the spirit world. It is correct to say that once he was basically his father, out of sight, out of mind, is Hak Jahan's attitude towards father right now. Hey, he's not existing in the physical body. I can't see his physical body. Therefore, I can ignore him. I don't have to consider his presence. So, but the second king though accepts that father is still in charge of the providence. The second king accepts and believes and is certain and experiences that father is still leading the providence. And it is the second king's responsibility to obey father in his leadership. And that is what makes the second king great. That is what makes him great. Because he is obeying his father. And he is the true filial son. A true loyal subject, even when being chased and put to death by traitors, never calls his king incapable. So that also describes the second king. He is the true loyal subject, because he, even when being chased by the Family Federation, and he hasn't been put to death, but even if he were put to death, even if he were to be put into a position of death, he would never call his king, true father, incapable. A true loyal subject is a person of integrity and loyalty who sheds tears with a sorrowful heart and wishes his king a long life, even when persecuted by treacherous courtiers to the point of death. Again, that's exactly the attitude of our second king towards true father. This is absolute obedience. The only way to bring about success through absolute obedience is the way of true love. And you can see that our king, the second king, loves his father, loves the King of Kings with true love. And this is why he is bringing about success through absolute obedience. Success through absolute obedience. You know, when we read the Washington Post article that came out a few days ago, it's just amazing to look back over the last 5 years and to see how far the king has come in this short time of 5 years. And it's because he is following the leadership of Father. It's because he is following the leadership of Father that he has been able to come this far in terms of his outreach to the world. You know, the Family Federation will point to, just a bunch of what was it they say? What did Pfefferman call us? Or was it Pfefferman or someone else? Zealots? A small group of zealots or something like that, which is actually an improvement. We used to be a group of old, discontented old members or something like that a few years back, I remember. So zealots, I think, is a pretty good improvement from that. But anyway, the Family Federation continues to try to dismiss the king based on these kinds of what they see, because they only consider what they can see with their eyes. The Family Federation does not see the spiritual aspect anymore, so they don't see what incredible things are occurring around the world by Father through the second king. They don't see that anymore, and so they only focus on the material things that they can see. But to get that kind of an article in the Washington Post, and I'm pretty sure that is the most positive article that has appeared in the Washington Post about the Unification Church or about Father or about something to do with True Father in the history of the Post, probably in the history of the Post, at least since Watergate, at least since 1973. There may have been something more positive before that, I don't know. Probably not, though. Probably not. I'm sure, I think Father must be very, very proud of the second king right now in spirit world, and very happy with the second king, with what he has been able to build in the physical world like this. And that success has come through absolute obedience. And the way that he's brought about that success is the way of true love for Father, true love for Father. So I think this Rima this morning is, Father, I think through this Rima is testifying to the second king. Yeah, Father, I think is testifying to the second king. That's amazing, isn't it? Yeah, okay. All right, let's take another break and we'll come back with more news after this.
Hi there, folks, and look at what I've got here today. My God, take a look at this. This is a BFR in 454 Casul with an octagonal barrel, magna porting, micarta grips. And look at that, it even has my initials on it, JM. Look at that thing of beauty, my God. Pop open the cartridge insertion door, and look at that cylinder spin. The finest revolvers in the world. That's the cannon. That's the cannon. Oh, man. Pretty accurate, though. Pretty much on target. Oh, boy. Massive recoil.
At break of day, in hope we rise. We speak your name.
All right, we're back with the King's Report on May 26th, 2018. Tim Miller sitting in for the second King of China, Hyungjin Moon. And Hillary Clinton in her 90-degree winter coat with scarf hiding something on her back spoke at Harvard. I guess this was, when was this? Yesterday, I guess. Anyway, recently. And she says that she would like to be CEO of Facebook. Imagine that, huh? A failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton said she would like to be CEO of Facebook. Would that be better or worse than Matt Zuckerberg? I don't know. Have to think about that. That's a tough question. I don't know. Speaking to an audience at Harvard University alongside Massachusetts Attorney General Maura Healey, Clinton was asked what company, if any, she would like to be CEO of. Clinton said she made Facebook her choice because the social media giant is the biggest news platform in the world. We can listen to really brilliant, experienced writers like David Ignatius to try to keep up with the news, continued Clinton, but most people in our country get their news, true or not, from Facebook. Clinton went on to talk about Facebook's efforts to limit the reach of anti-establishment news sources on Facebook. The company has persecuted this. The company has presented this as a politically neutral crusade against fake news, but the results of the social network's recent changes show that the mainstream media's reach on the platform has soared, while conservative and anti-establishment media has fallen. Facebook is trying to take on some of the unexpected consequences of their business model, and I, for one, hope they get it right, because it really is critical to our democracy that people get accurate information on which to make decisions. So accuracy, though, is also in the eye of the beholder. I mean, accuracy, for example, even, I think, well, at least young journalists are always taught that even if you have a traffic accident and you have 3 eyewitnesses, they will all say different things. The 3 eyewitnesses will all see different things of that same traffic accident. So which is the accurate story? You cannot just label 2 of them fake and 1 of them true. They have different points of view. They come at different angles. They were different lighting situations, so forth. All kinds of things come into play. But Hillary then is saying only the Democratic perspective, only the Democratic Party's perspective is true, and everything else is false. That only her, well, to be even more, when we say Democratic Party, she doesn't want Bernie Sanders involved in that. Only her perspective is true. And this is where you get into totalitarian media control. Totalitarian governments will only allow their perspective to be published in the media. This is what I experienced in South Korea when I was living there during the years of the final year of Park Chung-hee's Yushin administration, and then the Chun Doo-hwan, especially the Fifth Republic in the 1980s. Only the government's perspective was allowed to be published. I remember covering a meeting of some of the opposition people in South Korea in one of the hotels there, and there was in the back there was a line of journalists, lined up along the back, busily writing down notes, And I wondered to myself, what are these people writing for? I mean, this event, I remember thinking to myself, this event is not going to get any coverage in any South Korean media because the government does not allow, at that time, the government did not allow, events by the political opposition to be covered at all. The political opposition could have a meeting like this with a room full of people, 200, 300 people like that, talking about how they want to proceed in trying to minimize the dictatorial control of Park Chung-hee, or whatever, I think it was Chun Doo-hwan at that time. That will never appear on any television station or any newspaper at that time. But these reporters are just busily writing away. What are they doing? I respected them because they were writing articles that would never appear. But they were, I guess, being true to their calling. But that is the kind of situation that Hillary Clinton wants. So only her perspective can be published. And she's congratulating Facebook for rooting out all those media organizations that don't agree with her, that will not present the truth as she sees it. And this is why the elite admire China, admire Xi Jinping, and see his dictatorial rule as a kind of a model for the world. Where Xi Jinping has a one-party dictatorship, and everything comes under that party. Even the government comes under the party. The military comes under the party. All businesses, of course, come under the party, have to obey the party. Religion. Xi Jinping has made very clear that religion must obey the party. Cannot worship God, it must obey the party and obey God. So that is the kind of world that Clinton would bring about if she were in charge, and if she were CEO of Facebook. I'm sure she would do everything she could to censor the news. Because that is her mindset. She still has that mindset. She still wants to impose her utopia, her personal utopia. That is the communist mindset. Okay, but I still have to wonder what is underneath that coat. All right, let's go on to something else. Also on Breitbart, Delingpole is saying that time is nearly up for Britain's useless anti-Brexit prime minister. Britain we're at the end of May now, so 10 months now, right? 2 years ago, I wrote 10 months. That is until the 2-year period for leaving Brexit comes to an end. 2 years ago, I wrote what may have been the most prophetic headline of my journalistic career. And the headline is this: better a Cocker Spaniel as Prime Minister than Theresa May. I don't mean to insult all Cocker Spaniels. Of course, I recognize that with the right training, their natural intelligence can be channeled and they can be made into the most excellent gun dogs. But as anyone has ever owned a spaniel can confirm, they are also prone to being quite exceptionally idiotic and useless. Nowhere near as idiotic and useless as Britain's current Prime Minister, especially where Brexit is concerned. Every now and then I find myself having to explain to Americans what has become of the amazing Brexit revolution, which they heard about a lot at the time. The vote was in June 2016, because in many ways it was the precursor to the Trump revolution. When I tell them that virtually nothing has been achieved in the 2 years since, that the Remainer establishment has been doing everything in its power to frustrate the democratic will of 17.4 million Leave voters, they're astonished. How can this be, they want to know. Well, the number one reason, I'd say, is Theresa May. She's a Remainer by inclination and by public record. She's utterly enthralled to the Remainer-dominated civil service. She lacks the imagination or ideological backbone to make a persuasive case for a fairer, freer, friendlier Britain outside the shackles of the European Union. I totally agree with Daniel Kaczynski, the conservative backbench MP I had on my podcast the other day. He recently told Sky News, Daniel Kaczynski, I guess you pronounce that, said Theresa May was not an authentic Brexiteer and could renege on her promise that Britain will exit the customs union, leaving Britain in dangerous, uncharted territory. The MP for Shrewsbury and Atcham in Shropshire warned that if she did, UKIP would come back like a phoenix and destabilize the Conservatives like we've never seen before. He added that some people in Parliament were doing everything in their power to neuter Brexit, specifically accusing 14 rebels in his own party of taking advantage of its tiny majority to block Brexit. Also, she's not a conservative, just an authoritarian social democrat who drifted into the party because we don't have an authoritarian social democrats party. Up to now, conservatives, especially those in government, have been cautious about trying to wow, this is a word I've never seen before. Defenestrate May. They've been cautious about trying to defenestrate May. Is that really a word? I'll bet you a couple of you out there don't know the meaning of it either, so I'm going to look it up for our edification. This is the word of the day. Okay. Defenestrate, I see. Throws someone out of a window. Wow, there's a word for that. Remove or dismiss someone from a position of power or authority. All right, there you go. Defenestrate, okay. There's your word of the day. So, up until now, conservatives, especially those in the government, have been cautious about trying to defenestrate May, about throwing her out the window, apparently. What was the other definition? Remove or dismiss someone from a position of power or authority. All right. Wow. Okay, wow. Aren't you glad you tuned in to King's Report? Defenestrate. The received wisdom, complete rubbish, I've always thought, but still, has been that it's just too risky a move with the socialist Jeremy Corbyn lurking in the wings, itching to turn Britain into the next Venezuela. That may be on the SAT test. Yeah, I may want to remember that one, defenestrate. But I think now everyone has had enough, and if it is, you can thank me. Here are some encouraging signs that she won't be around for much longer. Sajid Javid, the new Home Secretary, is profiled here by Fraser Nelson in a piece touting him as a possible contender for the next PM. I'd still personally prefer the Mog, who wouldn't, but in politics you rarely get the candidate you want, and Javid has an awful lot going for him, not least that he totally gets free markets. Oh, and he doesn't like to play the race card. His friend said he can't bring himself to spin a hard luck story because he feels nothing but gratitude for his upbringing. A mother who, though illiterate, supervised his study every day. Then Exeter University, where he met his wife, a vice president of Chase Manhattan Bank at the age of 25, and a close relationship with four brothers whose lives are, like his, a case study in what Michael Howard famously called the British dream. He's also a case study of the type of Tory who dislikes identity politics and, as a result, seldom talks about who he is. Next, we must mention the resignation of your favorite new MP you'd never heard of before. Her name is Andrea Jenkins. Conservative MP for Morley and Outwood, she has resigned from her position as a junior minister in protest at the government's laggardly progress on Brexit. At her website, she writes, quote, "Currently I sit on the Committee for Exiting the European Union, where we examine and scrutinize witnesses, experts, and ministers who have massive influence on our country's future. Securing Brexit and safeguarding the right kind of departure is important to me personally, and I know is a very important issue for my constituents. As we get closer to us leaving the EU, my committee business will be more important than ever, and I believe it best I do all I can to fight to secure the right direction for our country's future. Currently, there are 21 members on the Brexit committee, only 7 of which voted to leave the EU. It is my opinion that the reports produced by the committee have been unbalanced in favor of us either remaining in the EU, the customs union, or delaying our departure. I therefore feel I need to spend more of my time doing all I can do to correct this imbalance and be a robust voice for the benefits of Brexit. During my time on the committee, it has become clear that some of my colleagues are committed to upsetting the democratic decision of the British people. Over the past few months, this situation has caused me much frustration, but since this disparity is unlikely to change, I feel it is my duty to give the necessary attention to this vitally important role. Principled, that's the end of the quote. Principled, yes, but also surely canny. As a woman, she must know that she stands a better chance of preferment than her male colleagues. She must sense that this was a gamble worth taking in order to enjoy even better opportunities under a more robustly pro-Brexit conservative leader. I hope she's right. Good luck to her. Finally, we should note that the Tory party's backers are getting restive about this lame duck prime minister. As Christopher Hope reports here, and quoting here, Theresa May needs to be quit. Theresa May needs to be quit as prime minister I'm not sure here what this sentence is trying to say. I'll read it just as it is. Theresa May needs to be quit as prime minister because the Brexit talks resemble a Greek tragedy and it only ends when everyone is dead, a leading Tory party donor says today. Jeremy Hosking, a city financier who has donated £375,000 to the party since 2015, says the government's strategy to exit the European Union had to change. Mr. Hosking is the first major donor to speak out against Mrs. May and her Brexit talks. End of quote. Yep, if we want Brexit, May has to go. It's really that simple. Now, why did no one listen when I said this 2 years ago? So Brexit is scheduled to go into effect in end of March or beginning of April of next year, and absolutely nothing has been done to prepare for that. So this is not very good for the people of Britain, because a hard Brexit will perhaps I think create a lot of pain for a lot of people. And let's coming back to the U.S. now. Another columnist on Breitbart says that Pelosi is so unpopular, GOP could keep House majority in the midterms. This is by Frank Luntz. Thursday on Fox News Channel's The Ingram Angle, pollster Frank Luntz said the unpopularity of House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi could mean Republicans keep the House majority in November's midterms. When asked about the generic congressional vote numbers tightening in favor of Republicans, said, I've been tracking this on a weekly basis going back now for a year and a half, and these are the best numbers the GOP has had in the last year. One of the reasons is that working women with children have begun to leave the Democratic Party. It's not they are pro-Republican, but what they see among the Democrats is the negativity that turned them off in previous elections. Second is that Nancy Pelosi is simply the least popular credible figure in the Democratic Party right now. She is more unpopular than Hillary and Chuck Schumer. He continued, if Republicans could find some way to engineer a vote over who would be Speaker of the House in January 2019, if they could engineer that vote, I would be prepared to say right now that Republicans would keep the majority, because there are so many people out there, swing voters, who do not want Pelosi as Speaker. That one action would make a difference. He added, if the GOP can get a Pelosi vote and energize their base, then they will keep the majority. Well, we'll see what happens in November, but we need to be working all out to help the Republican Party keep the majority in the House next year when the new Congress convenes. Here in the 8th District of Pennsylvania, the new 8th District unilaterally declared by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court against the Constitution of Pennsylvania. But anyway, here in the 8th District, we have a good Republican candidate for Congress, John Schrin, Chrin, and he is a lifetime NRA member. He is very pro-life, and he sounds like he would be a very good person to have in Congress. But we need to get him there. We need to get him there over the next 4, 5, 6 months. All right, let's go back to Drudge and see what else is cooking there. Subtropical storm Alberto to strengthen over the next 48 hours and drench the Gulf Coast. Tech companies scramble as sweeping EU data rules take effect, already accused of breaking laws. Sites go dark, heightened debate over privacy. Spotify eases hate playlist policy after outcry. Walk and chew gum. It may keep you thin, study says. Facial recognition can spot liars? ? Let's see. Half of Americans can't afford a vacation this summer. Ex-AIDS congressman and wife made them servants. Cockroach milk touted as next superfood. Seattle, fastest growing city in USA. Foreign hackers compromise home routers. I always thought that Seattle was the best place to live. I enjoyed living there when I was on MFT. And, all this stuff about the rain there, I've been telling people, a lot of that is people in Seattle spreading this word about, the rain in Seattle, so as to keep other people out. And apparently the word has gotten out, the secret has gotten out that actually there not as much rain as people say. And so more people are finally moving to Seattle. That's too bad. It was a nice, small, large city. Let's look at this cockroach milk, shall we? Just for kicks, before we go to break here. What is this about cockroach milk? How are you gonna get it, for one thing? Cockroach milk, experts call insect dairy the next superfood. Trying to imagine those things that they put on cows to harvest or to take the milk out of the cows. How are you going to do that with a cockroach? It have to be a very, very small milking machine, wouldn't it? Anyway, scientists say they have discovered the next superfood that's perfect. It's a perfect non-dairy alternative. However, they may have a hard time getting people to try cockroach milk. Using a 2016 report on the benefits of insect dairy, scientists found that the Pacific beetle cockroach of Hawaii possesses nutrient-filled milk crystals which they use to feed their young. A single crystal is estimated to contain more than 3 times the energy of an equivalent mass of dairy milk, the report stated. Who studies this stuff? Are you kidding me? And who pays them to study this stuff? Anyway, the study published in the Journal of the International Union of Crystallography, I guess that is crystallography, also found that the milk-like superfood was full of amino acids and sugar-coated proteins, which makes this a natural gold mine for humans. Some companies are already trying to get ahead of the trend by selling the bug juice in everything from milk to ice cream. Think of Entomilk as a sustainable, nature-friendly, nutritious, lactose-free, delicious, guilt-free dairy alternative of the future, South African company Gourmet Grub writes. Scientists and entrepreneurs both admit this trend may take some serious work to convince people they should switch to a bug-heavy diet. Yes, there will be people who think insects are icky or have a yuck factor, but the ingredients are so versatile, Jared Golden of Canada's Entomo Farms said via Global News. All right. Bug juice. Bug juice. All right. Have fun. I doubt that I'll be trying it. Okay. Let's see. What else have we got here? Well, let's go ahead and take our 7 o'clock break now. All right. See you in 5 minutes.
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
To the least of these, if not us, tell me who will be like Jesus, like Jesus.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, May 26th, 2018. Tim Elder sitting in for the second King of Cheongguk, Hyungjin Moon. You know, some people have said to me that might be better if I had someone here with me on Saturdays and things like that. And hey, you know, there's an open invitation. There's an open invitation to people who want to come and who want to be on stage with me. Do you want to come up here? Oh, we have someone in the audience right now, but she doesn't want to come up on stage. Really? Okay, she says no. But there's an open invitation, all right? So, and those who are suggesting that I have someone, obviously God is inspiring you to come here. So get here, all right? I'm just saying, God's inspiring you to be here. Yeah? So don't tell me to find someone. God has already found someone. That is you. You are the person that God wants to have here. All right, so let's go to this situation with the tech companies and their situation with the new privacy laws in Europe that are coming into effect. Tech companies, this is a Hill article, tech companies scramble to deal with these sweeping data rules that are coming into effect in Europe. A sweeping set of new data privacy regulations. These pages do something strange sometimes. Let's try to bring this down. All of a sudden, a new photograph pops up and the text goes down. A sweeping set of new data privacy regulations descending on Europe is leaving internet companies in the U.S. scrambling to overhaul their practices to avoid steep penalties. Companies like Google, Twitter, Yelp, and Uber have in recent weeks sent notices to their users about updates to privacy policies. Oh, so that's why we've been getting those updates. Sent policies and user agreements aimed at making their data collection practices more transparent. The moves are part of an industry-wide effort to prepare for the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which goes into effect on Friday, and that would be yesterday, and forces companies to give full disclosure about what they do with the digital data they collect and offer their users more control over their information. Under the new rules, European users are able to request copies of the data that websites have on them or ask companies to delete that information. Websites have to ask for permission to collect and share user data, and companies need to disclose their data practices in clear language instead of obscuring them with legalese. The GDPR only applies to the member states of the European Union, but users in the U.S. will also see changes as some websites decide to apply the new protections beyond Europe. The law will affect virtually any company that collects and stores sensitive data, from healthcare organizations to banks, but the burden of complying will fall harder on some companies than others, depending on their data practices. Companies will have an easier time complying if their business model is not built around exploiting personal information and selling it on the open market, says Cynthia Cole, a lawyer at international law firm Baker Botts LLP based in Silicon Valley. Cole, who's advising firms on implementing GDPR reforms, explained that the new rules put a tremendous cost on businesses that collect a large amount of data and share it with third parties, forcing them to devote a large amount of back-end analysis to figure out where the data is going. The Internet is already seeing an impact ahead of the rollout. Instapaper, a service owned by Pinterest that allows users to clip online articles to read later, announcing that it would be temporarily unavailable to users in the EU after determining it was not fully prepared to comply with the GDPR. I underestimated the scope of work required by the deadline, and this was the required alternative, Instapaper CEO Brian Donahue tweeted on Thursday. Meanwhile, advertising companies like Verve, the location-based mobile marketing firm, and Drawbridge, a cross-device targeting firm, have closed their European operations in advance of the deadline to begin implementing the new data protections. But some regulators are accusing Internet giants of trying to evade the tougher requirements of the law. Last month, Giovanni Buttarelli, the EU's top data watchdog, blasted Internet sweatshops, saying that some of their proposed changes don't go far enough toward correcting exploitative data collection. He warned companies against trying to manipulate users into agreeing to giving over sensitive data in exchange for their services. We must all be vigilant about attempts to game the system, Buttarelli wrote in a blog post. Companies have plenty of reason to heed his warnings. Websites risk incurring a massive financial penalties if they don't comply. The biggest privacy offenses under the new rules could result in either a fine of $23.5 million or 4% of a company's worldwide revenue, whichever is higher. The new law, originally adopted 2 years ago, is realizing full implementation at a time when data privacy continues to attract massive attention in the U.S. as a result of Facebook's role in the Cambridge Analytica scandal. The data mining firm, which has ties to President Trump's election campaign, improperly, to many others as well, actually, improperly obtained data on 87 million Facebook users without their consent. In response to the backlash, Facebook has promised to extend all of its changes for the GDPR to users beyond Europe. This scandal has given momentum to privacy advocates calling for comprehensive data rules in the U.S. in the spirit of the GDPR. And the GDPR in turn has given them a roadmap for what to aim for in the States. Facebook is a tool that can be very useful. But just like a chainsaw, if you're not careful, you're going to cut off your arm. But if you use it correctly, you can cut down a tree that needs to be cut down. So we need to think very carefully about how we use Facebook. Don't put data up there that you don't want shared. And then this thing about friends only, no, listen, anything that goes up there eventually is going to wind up in the hands of just about everybody. So don't put anything up there that you don't want shared. Your phone number, your address, this kind of thing. If you don't want it shared throughout the world, don't put it up there. And of course, the photographs. Facebook now wants you to send them your nude photographs. Don't do that, all right? Well, don't take those photographs in the first place. But any photographs that you send to Facebook, I mean, come on, what do you expect? That they're going to keep those locked away forever? Forever is a long time. And there are a lot of peeping Toms, I'm sure, in Facebook. So let's be very, very wise about how we use Facebook. I mean, let's face it. The king would not have succeeded over the last 5 years if it had not been for tools such as Facebook and YouTube, Facebook, YouTube, and now Instagram. He's using Instagram, which is also owned by Facebook. These are things that were prepared by God for the second coming and for the building of Chonyuguk. The whole online thing, whole internet thing, the House of Representatives in Chonyuguk is going to have hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of members at some point in the future. So how can they conduct votes? Obviously, they cannot gather in one place. It's going to have to be done online. This whole thing of online, that the internet thing that was developed and really came into use during the early 1990s is something that is crucial for the advancement of the providence. But there's another side to it, and these tech giants right now have become sinister organizations, very threatening organizations that buy and sell our personal data. So don't give it to them. Don't give it to them. But continue to use. I continue to use Facebook as a tool, and I will continue to do that. I continue to use YouTube as a tool. YouTube is. Hillary was saying you're getting most of our news from Facebook. I get more of my news from YouTube, I think, than I do from Facebook. It's an important tool in this day and age, is because it democratizes. The whole internet revolution has democratized information, and now through cryptocurrency, it's even democratizing money. So it's important that we use these tools for those purposes. But these are tools, and if you misuse them, you can hurt yourself. Just remember that, and just remember that your friends on Facebook are not friends; they're contacts. They're contacts. The scandal has given momentum to privacy advocates calling for comprehensive data rules in the U.S. in the spirit of the GDPR, and the GDPR in turn has given them a roadmap for what to aim for in the states. It's a wonderful testing ground for ideas for privacy legislation, said Ali Bohm, a policy counsel with public knowledge. But we don't want this privacy legislation to move over into censorship legislation, right? We want to be careful about that. Privacy legislation is good, but not censorship. We must be careful about that. In the meantime, the European laws are giving tech companies' biggest U.S. critics a benchmark to which they can hold the industry. A group of Democratic senators on Thursday introduced a resolution calling on internet companies to expand their new GDPR changes to cover American users. And a coalition of consumer groups sent a letter to some of the biggest data collectors calling for the same thing. When the European privacy law takes effect, the American people are going to wonder why they are getting second-class privacy protections. Senator Ed Markey, Democrat of Massachusetts, said in a statement, if companies can afford to protect Europeans' privacy, they can also afford to do so for their American consumers and users. But even as more data leaks and breaches are revealed in the U.S., Congress does not appear to be moving toward the type of sweeping data regulations that are going into effect across the Atlantic. And it's still unclear what kind of changes American Internet users will see. Bohm notes that the EU will be relying on member states' individual data authorities to enforce the GDPR. But in the U.S., where the new rules have no teeth and there is no regulatory data watchdog, Bohm says the only new protections offered by Internet companies will come from the goodness of their hearts. Well, this is why competition is important. If we have competition, then it's out of the goodness of their hearts, but it also has a profit motive, because if they are caught misusing data or releasing data, then people will move to other places, other competitors. So that's why it's important that President Trump break up Amazon, break up Google, break up these large tech companies, break up Facebook, break up Twitter, so that different parts of them can compete against each other. The global impact of the new rules will also depend on whether digital firms will take them seriously or try to test the waters to see if they can get away with it. The devil is going to be in the details of the implementation, Bohm said, to the extent that they really overhaul their practices versus repackaging what they've already been doing remains to be seen. All right, so that's on the European new rules. But now we see, though, that Facebook and Google faced $8.8 billion in lawsuits on the first day of the new EU data laws. That's what we've just been talking about, the GDPR. We're now on Breitbart. Facebook and Google faced lawsuits of up to $8.8 billion on the first day of the new GDPR EU data laws, according to a report. The Verge reported that the two companies were hit with a raft of lawsuits accusing them of coercing users into sharing personal data. The lawsuits, which seek to fine Facebook $3.9 billion and Google €3.7 billion, roughly $8.8 billion, were filed by Austrian privacy activist Max Schrems, a longtime critic of the company's data collection practices. They reported, adding, GDPR requires clear consent and justification for any personal data collected from users, and these guidelines have pushed companies across the internet to revise their privacy policy and collection practices. Both Google and Facebook have rolled out new policies and products to comply with GDPR, but Schrems' complaints argue those policies don't go far enough, they've explained. In particular, the complaint singles out the way companies obtain consent for the privacy policies, asking users to check a box in order to access services. It's a widespread practice for online services, but the complaints argue that it forces users into an all-or-nothing choice, a violation of the GDPR's provisions around particularized consent. Facebook responded to the new GDPR regulations by moving data from Ireland to the United States, while some American websites blocked European visitors as they struggled to keep up with the new laws. All right, so there's that. That's what's going on. All right, let's take a break, and we'll be back with more news after this.
Bye. Boy, wasn't that fun shooting this Tommy gun today?
It's always fun shooting Tommy guns. This one especially, it's just absolutely gorgeous.
All polished and chromed up. It really looks like $1 million.
Yeah. Elliot Ness would have loved one of those.
Yeah, and it's available right now in your favorite dealer, and you go pick one up.
Yeah, just have him call your distributor.
I mean, the gun, was initially made way back when, back in the 27 is this one.
Yeah, Model
But
27.
I was surprised by how quick it knocked down those plates.
Oh, 3.5 second run, under 3.5 second run, knocking down a plate right. 341.
I mean, the gun is heavy. It's about 12, 14 pounds, especially with this drum. But it's surprising how quick you can go with it. It would actually make quite a good self-defense rifle at home.
If I climbed in somebody's window and they were aiming that at me, I think I'd get out of there real quick. So
that sounds about right to me.
Just the intimidation factor alone.
Fire!
At break of day, in hope we rise, we speak your name.
Welcome back to the King's Report for May 26th, Saturday, 2018. I'm just looking at some of the comments on our broadcast. Per person says, according to GDPR, your insurance company has not the right to store metadata about you more than necessary. Okay. Let's see. There's a translation going on. Okay, here again, per person says, GDPR will not allow Facebook to give your phone, nor further if they have access to it, or your email. It's a treat to our integrity. Okay, good, yeah. FBI has copyrights on all photos you upload. They can sell them. Yeah, okay, good, yeah. Thank you, Per. You've been putting a lot of good comments on here. Sweden has strict laws before, but in EU, companies have been irresponsible with their personal data. According to GDPR, companies don't have the right to archive unnecessary information about customers longer than necessary. Companies should not be preserved after it has been fixed, etc. Okay. All right, well, thank you very much, Para. It's great that you're writing like this. You can also, if you want, if people cannot come to Newfoundland, then you can call in or something like that, and we can arrange for you to, or we could even arrange for you to appear on Zoom. I think our tech team can handle that if you want to do that. So let me know. Texas town crowd funds rebuilding effort for damaged Veterans Memorial. So this is this is an example of what we'd like to see in Chattanooga, crowdfunding, where instead of paying taxes, we crowdfund those projects that we think are important for our community. And this is, I think, an example of that. Texas Town crowdfunds rebuilding effort for damaged Veterans Memorial. A Western Central Texas community jumped in to help an area veterans group raise funds to restore a war memorial that mysteriously sustained thousands of dollars of damage in the past week. Breitbart, Texas reported that 4 of the 12 commemorative granite tablets, part of a larger memorial, was found in pieces on Sunday by Harold Stieber, president of the Central Texas Veterans Memorial Committee. He estimated the replacement tablets could cost more than $40,000. The Central Texas Veterans Memorial recognizes all U.S. war veterans in a dozen stone structures and 14 plaques, but specifically pays homage to the 259 locals who died while serving their country from World War I to military operations as recently as post 9/11. One of the destroyed tablets read in part, "We honor all selfless heroes for your courageous service. Your sacrifice is what made this country great. We salute you." Dr. Steve Kelly, the group's immediate past president, told Breitbart, Texas, that this tribute site located in Brownwood stands in a city-owned park that was once the 36th Division headquarters of the World War II military training facility, Camp Bowie. He called the memorial a salute to sacrifice. Kelly estimated each of the destroyed tablets weighed roughly 3,000 pounds. In April, the U.S. World War I Centennial Commission designated the Central Texas Veterans Memorial as one of their 100 World War I centennial sites. Although the cause of the devastation remains unknown, Brownwood police continue to investigate. For now, some believe gale force winds toppled the sturdy tablets. Others suspect vandalism. On Monday, Weston Jacobs, who manages his family's hardware store in Brownwood, offered to haul off the crumbled rocks in his truck after he learned what happened to the 4 monuments. This young man said he felt compelled to help after he saw a local woman standing in tears at the memorial. There she saw the name of her son, who was killed in Iraq in 2006, remained intact on one of the tablets still standing. It was pretty touching to see her walk up there and touch the stone with her son's name. She didn't know anybody was looking, he told Breitbart in Texas on Friday. That changed the game for me as far as why we were doing what we were doing. For Jacobs, this moment transformed the reality of hauling off rubble into an idea to auction off the broken stones with some incredible history written on them to help raise funds for the replacement tablets, he said. My first instinct was to make a bad thing a good thing. The fundraiser will be held all day Saturday, as today, at Weekly Watson Ace Hardware, first founded in 1876 as a wagon shop. That's a Weekly Watson Ace Hardware, if you want to call them up, in Brownwood, Texas, WEAKLEY-WATSON, Ace Hardware, Weekly Watson Ace Hardware. First founded in 1876 as a wagon shop, Jacobs plans to auction off statue chunks from paperweight size to those that weigh up to 40 or 50 pounds. He says some of the larger decorative pieces will be sold through a silent auction. All proceeds will go to restoring the damaged war memorial. Jacobs called the reaction he has received so far about the auction incredible. He said, "We're a small hardware store in West Texas. I'm having people call every day just asking how they can help." He said people from all over the country who have never even seen the monument have called the hardware store. He added that anyone who wants to help should call the store. However, Jacobs emphasized that the day is really about those who gave absolutely everything they could give, who fought for us, and those who died serving their country. He stated, "We just want to do something small to give back." All right, so that's going on today, actually, in this town in Texas, Brownwood, Texas. Additionally, Kelly created a GoFundMe page to help raise money for replacement tablets. Kelly said the Veterans Group hopes to raise $50,000. As of press time, they have received $1,066 toward that goal. Let me just click on this and see what the current amount is. How much? Oh, $8,000. They're now up to $8,790. Wow. Okay. This is GoFundMe.com/CTVM Repair. CTVM Repair. After the GoFundMe.com/. So they've gotten up to 8,700 or something. He told Breitbart, Texas, "Our sole purpose is that we are unconditionally committed to repairing and restoring our memorial to its original state." Undeterred by the damages, the Central Texas Veterans Memorial Group will hold a Memorial Day service on Monday. Wow. That's very inspiring. That's a wonderful story. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for inspiring this young man who owns this hardware store to start this crowdfunding campaign instead of relying on government funds to restore something. And a lot more projects can be done this way. I think even here we talk about roads. especially in the springtime or now summertime, we have all these potholes in the roads. Roads can be managed through private efforts in the same way. President Trump spoke at the Naval Academy, and when he did, he spent an hour and a half, 90 minutes, shaking hands with hundreds of Naval Academy graduates. President Donald Trump delivered the commencement speech at the U.S. Naval Academy's graduation ceremony in Annapolis, Maryland on Friday, and vowed to shake the hand of each outgoing student. I could make this commencement address, which is a great honor for me, and immediately leave and wave goodbye. Or I could stay and shake hands with just the top 100. Or I could stay for hours and shake hands with 1,000 and something. What should I do? What should I do? Trump asked the cheering crowd. I'll stay. Following the commencement address, ABC News released 41-second time-lapse video of President Trump shaking hands with hundreds of graduates for close to an hour and a half. That's amazing. But what he said there was also very inspiring. I don't see that immediately available, so I'm going to look it up on Google News. Trump naval. Basically said that America is back. Let's see. Here we go. It's the New York Times. Do we have a better source? Okay, let's see when. All right, it's just bad, worse, and worst. So, all right, let's let's look at the New York Times. Trump tells Naval Academy graduates America is respected again. And yeah, I think that's true. Democrats will, and the reason I hesitate is because I know the New York Times will try and say that the opposite is true. And I think a good example is the way in which he pulled out of the North Korea talks, but then is now continuing to talk with North Korea. North Korea tried to get Trump to play its game, and Trump said, no, if that's the way you're going to be, I'm going to walk away. And he walked away. And then North Korea came back and said, oh, well, we're still ready to meet you. So now they're talking again. And now the latest is that that summit could still happen on June 12th in Singapore. We'll see what happens. But so Trump is making America respected again. Under Obama, maybe the elites respected it. Maybe the elites condescendingly sort of gave U.S. kind of kudos. But people, but especially it's important to be respected by the evil people. Evil has to respect good. And when that happens, then evil doesn't act so evil in such evil ways. Evil needs to know that their evil actions will have consequences. That's respect. And when they understand that, they will not act in such evil ways. Anyway, let's see what the New York Times says, and we'll try to pick through this, see what we can come up. President Trump declared Friday that the United States is respected again because of a military that is a lot stronger, as he welcomed the 2018 graduates of the Naval Academy into what he called the most powerful and rightful force on the planet. Presidents often use the annual commencement addresses at the country's military academies to tout their foreign policy successes, urging the next generation of military officers to embrace the commander-in-chief's vision of a world worthy of protecting. Mr. Trump did that, saying without specifics that the new naval officers and Marines should be proud to be joining a military that he said is recovering from years of shrinkage and decay. We are witnessing the great reawakening of the American spirit and of American might, he said, to applause from the 30,000 people of the Naval Academy Stadium. We have rediscovered our identity, regained our stride, and we are proud again. Those are all true statements. And this is the change that has taken place from the Obama administration and from the Clinton administration. America is not going around the world apologizing to everyone. America is not going around the world giving compromises to evil. He's standing up to evil, and he's saying, "Hey, we're not going to play your game. If you want to play, you got to play my game." This is what Trump is saying, and it's great. It's fantastic. Mr. Trump's predecessors have also used the commencement to confront the challenges of foreign policy, diplomacy, and war. In 2002, after the 9/11 attacks, President George W. Bush announced a policy of preemptive war during his address at the Army's West Point commencement. Mr. Trump made no mention of broad foreign policy issues or specific challenges that the country faces abroad, including the collapse of his efforts at the international diplomacy on Korean Peninsula. See, that's the New York Times. It's not a collapse. It's not a collapse. Collapse of his efforts at the international diplomacy on the Korean Peninsula. This is why Trump calls, and we call, New York Times the failing New York Times. That's why he calls fake news. It's not collapsing. He did the right thing there. And it's continuing. And actually, this is the part of the process by which you subdue North Korea, by saying, "I'm not going to play your game," walking away. Trump is subduing North Korea. It's not a collapse at all. On Thursday, Mr. Trump abruptly called off his planned summit meeting with Kim Jong-un, the leader of North Korea, citing the counterpart's open hostility and public statements. And why does the New York Times segue into this North Korea thing here? In terminating the meeting, at least for now, Mr. Trump returned to the confrontational posture toward North Korea that he initially adopted as president. Okay, enough of that. Come on, let's get back to the commencement address. Let's see. The president has been intensely focused on the size and abilities of the United States military since before he took office. And once in charge of the government, Mr. Trump repeatedly pledged to increase funding to the armed services that he viewed as having shriveled in previous years. While the Pentagon's base budget was capped in 2011, funding for the military still far outstripped the rest of the world and was still higher than the next 7 countries combined. There you go again with the New York Times. America has a special, right? Excuse me. There are the neocons. There are the neocons that want to be around the world all the time, 150 countries or something like that, and we don't need to be in that, in that kind of a way around the world. In the first months of his presidency, Mr. Trump visited the Navy's newest aircraft carrier, the Gerald R. Ford, and promised to work to upgrade ships and submarines and seek more money for the sailors who operate them. We have by far the most powerful nuclear force on Earth, and it'll be absolutely in perfect shape and condition, Mr. Trump told the sailors on the ship that day. And hopefully, praise be to God, we don't ever have to use it, but there will be nobody that's even close. In his remarks at the commencement on Friday, Mr. Trump took note of the carrier Ford as he touted the size and strength of the country's naval forces, including what he said will eventually be 355 beautiful ships in the fleet. He said that is almost a couple of hundred more ships than is currently in the fleet. In fact, in 2016, the number of active ships was 275. The Navy plans to increase that to 355 by the 2050s. We're building that modern fleet, he said. We're sharpening the fighting edge of everything. As president, Mr. Trump signed a $1.3 trillion government spending bill that drastically increased the amount of money for the military. Yes, out of $1.3 billion, 1.3 trillion it is, 1.3 trillion, 700 billion was for the military. And he compromised, basically gave the Democrats, well, the Democrats say 80% of what they wanted in order to get that 700 billion for the military. So he gave the Democrats 600 billion. At the signing, the president complained that he did not want to sign the legislation because it failed to close immigration loopholes or provide enough money for a wall along the southern border with Mexico. But he said the money for the military was enough to persuade him to sign the bill anyway. It increases total defense spending by more than $60 billion from last year and funds the addition of critically needed ships, planes, helicopters, tanks, and submarines, he said during brief remarks after signing the spending bill. We have submarines being built like the likes of which there's nothing anywhere in the world like the submarines we build. Therefore, he said, he added, as a matter of national security, I've signed this omnibus bill. Mr. Trump has also promised repeatedly to help veterans reforming the Department of Veteran Affairs, a long-struggling bureaucracy. He succeeded in pushing through some bipartisan legislation aimed at improving service to military veterans. Maybe good to go through the Constitution right now about how the military will work in how the military will work in Cheongguk. Okay, the Constitution. And here, okay, so it says here, the President shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of the United States of Cheongguk and of the militia of the several states. When called into actual service of the United States of Cheongguk, he may require the opinion and writing of the principal officer in each of the executive departments upon any subject relating to the duties of their respective offices. And also here it says, the militia being the primary form of national defense, paid standing armies shall not be permitted or maintained. The army may maintain military equipment for use by the militia. So there will be a small cadre of officers who will maintain military equipment, but there will not be an army. However, one of the things that we have in the power of the Congress has, and this is in Article 3, Section 8, paragraph 12, it says to provide and maintain a Navy, Air Force, and Space Agency. Navy, Air Force, and Space Agency. So there will not be a standing army, but there will be a Navy, Air Force, and Space Agency, according to the Constitution. And the reason that we don't have a standing army, an important reason, is that armies in almost all countries of the world, I would say, have been used by the centralized power, by the central power, to oppress their own people. Even Abraham Lincoln did this. When during the draft riots in New York City during the Civil War. The Civil War was the first time that the draft was instituted in America. And when this happened, people in New York City, some people in New York City, quite a lot of people actually, rioted against this. And President Abraham Lincoln called out the Army to suppress them. He also used the Navy because there were some naval ships in New York Harbor at that time, and so he had them bomb, or actually shell. He had them shell the rioters and killed a lot of people. But he won the war. But this kind of thing happens through the history many times. Probably in any country you can find, if you go back and uncover enough history, you can find instances where armies, that is land forces, ground forces were used by the government to oppress their own people. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to have that. And if we give people arms, give people the right to bear arms, and also pass laws, if Congress will pass laws requiring people to receive training, and people can have their own specialized areas, so that when a need arises, that they can serve in a particular capacity in order to defend the nation. And so if that will be enough to defend the nation. There may be some difficulties, but we will win in the end. Righteousness will overpower evil in the end. President Donald Trump spent about an hour and a half, shaking the hands of these Naval Academy graduates. Mr. Trump has also promised repeatedly to help veterans by reforming the Department of Veterans Affairs, a long-time struggling bureaucracy. He succeeded in pushing through some bipartisan legislation aimed at improving service delivery to veterans. During his remarks at the Naval Academy, Mr. Trump underscored those successes. He said new legislation would allow employees of the Veterans Affairs Department to be quickly fired if they are not doing a good job of caring for the health and well-being of veterans. We're going to take care of our great veterans, he said. We are taking care of, finally, after decades, we are taking care of our veterans. But the president's efforts have been stymied in part by difficulties with the department's leadership. He fired David J. Shokin, his first Secretary of Veteran Affairs, after reports of excessive overseas travel and a revolt among Mr. Shokin's senior staff over the issue of privatization of services at the department. But Mr. Trump's choice to replace Mr. Shokin, Dr. Ronnie L. Jackson, a Navy Rear Admiral and the president's one-time White House doctor, withdrew from consideration after accusations that he berated his staff, dispensed medications too liberally, and was drunk at work. Mr. Trump has nominated Robert Wilkie, the acting Secretary of Veterans Affairs, to take the post permanently. Despite his oft-stated admiration of the military and its prowess, Mr. Trump has so far deployed the military sparingly. Well, yeah, I mean, what's wrong with that? In April 2017, the president ordered a strike on a Syrian Air Force air base using dozens of Tomahawk missiles in response to the Syrian government's use of chemical weapons. So, well, New York Times still hasn't looked at the evidence, has it? A year later, he ordered another slightly larger strike in Syria. Both strikes were focused and limited, a reflection of the president's stated reluctance to get the United States entangled in extended conflicts overseas. Throughout his campaign and as president, Mr. Trump has repeatedly complained that the United States was spending more money on adventures abroad than was spending to improve the lives of Americans at home. During the campaign, he told the New York Times that at some point we cannot be policemen of the world. And as president, he has said the United States spent $7 trillion fighting wars in the Middle East, a figure that fact checkers say is vastly exaggerated. Well, like you said, it depends on what you include. During the speech on Friday, Mr. Trump bragged about increasing the size of the military and said that a more powerful Army, Navy, and Air Force would keep the country safe by preventing the need to use them in the first place. The best way to prevent war is to be fully prepared for war, Mr. Trump told the graduates. Still, he added, if a fight must come, there's no other alternative. Victory, winning. Beautiful words, but that is what it is all about. His final words for the graduates, anchors away. Okay. Now, so New York Times putting its spin on this, especially with regard to the North Korea diplomacy, and it's really terrible to see how the liberal news has been piling on, just calling President Trump a failure just because he used this tactic of walking away in order to achieve ultimate success. But anyone who has, bargained at a bazaar or a market in many of these countries around the world, there's not much bargaining that going on in the United States and in American retailers. But in many countries, this is the common practice. And one thing you do when you bargain is at some point you walk away as the consumer. Yeah? And then the store owner says, "Oh, wait, come back." And that's exactly what's happening here. And eventually you get a good price, right? That's what will happen here. But New York Times, Washington Post, they want to talk about the failure of Donald Trump. They want any excuse to talk about the failure of Donald Trump, because that is what they've been hoping for the last year and a half. But apparently, according to President Trump's tweet last evening, things are actually going well now, and we may actually have a summit on the 12th. Then what's the New York Times going to say then? Oh, they'll probably give credit to North Korea then, yeah. It says here 11 hours ago in this tweet on the Twitter, we are having very productive talks with North Korea about reinstating the summit, which, if it does happen, will likely remain in Singapore on the same date, June 12th, and if necessary, will be extended beyond that date. So that's pretty good. That's pretty good. All right. So New York Times can go do whatever these people like to do. All right. Let's see, we have about 10 minutes left. Let's look at this. French police arrest garbage men planning smelly Macron protest. All right. Sounds like something good to read just before breakfast. Paris police hold 2 garbage men planning smelly, just 2 of them. That's not a very big thing, is it? 2 refuse collectors, that's, hold on a second. All right. 2 refuse collectors were arrested Friday morning in central Paris after stealing a garbage truck with plans to empty the load at the headquarters of the President Emmanuel Macron's Republic on the Move party, LREM party. Officers intercepted the truck taken from a depot in northern 18th arrondissement of the city, not far from the party offices in central Paris, a police source told AFP. At least a dozen officers with guns drawn surrounded the truck, warning bystanders back as they secured the area before apprehending the men and calling in an explosives removal team. Security forces have been on high alert following a string of jihadist attacks since 2015, most recently a knife rampage in the same area of Paris on May 12th. At the same time, on Friday, more than 100 CGT union activists occupied the LREM premises near the main Paris Opera House to protest the government's plans to overhaul French public services. Baptiste Talbot, the CGT official, told AFP they had cut off water and electricity to the building before leaving. Public sector workers have staged a series of strikes and demonstrations against the reform plan, which calls for the greater use of contract workers for some services and a cut of 120,000 state jobs out of 5.6 million in total by the end of Macron's term in 2022. Wow, so Macron is reducing the number of state jobs by 120,000. Meanwhile, in the United States, Bernie Sanders wants to give a state job to every American who wants one. Their protest came as workers at the national rail operator SNCF are protesting a reform plan which would deny job for life and early retirement guarantees to new hires. Deny job for life. Oh, my goodness. Oh, these people. Well, they're going to bring down their country. They may save their job. Save your job. Bring down your country. Yeah. That's basically their bumper sticker, isn't it? Okay, let's look at this story about the Seattle. I want to look at this. I was there for about a year and several months on NFT. Seattle Times says 114,000 more people. Seattle now decade's fastest growing big city in all of the U.S. That's actually, for the people living in Seattle, I think this is kind of tragic because part of the beauty of Seattle was that it wasn't so big. New census data showed Seattle notched another year of impressive population gains in 2017. But, the media always reports these as if it's a good thing that people are being concentrated more into these big cities. Notched another year of impressive population gains in 2017. See, they're egging it on. They're saying this is a good thing. Yeah, we want more people. We want 10 million people. We've now outpaced Austin in rate of growth since the start of the decade, ballooning 18.7% or 114,000 more people. Seattle has its critics. You probably heard some fed-up folks grumbling about leaving the city, and now some businesses, too, and the fallout from our controversial new head tax on large companies. But say what you will about Seattle, you can't say that people don't want to live here. The U.S. Census Bureau released new population figures for U.S. cities on Thursday, and they show that Seattle has toppled Austin, Texas, to become the nation's fastest-growing big city this decade. So why do elitists want big cities to grow? Why do they want to discourage people from living in rural areas? Well, it's a matter of control, isn't it? It's a matter of control. People in rural areas are more difficult to control because we have our own land and we protect that land with our own guns. And largely, people in cities tend to be less apt to own guns, I think. My general impression, I haven't seen statistics, but my general impression is that. And they seem to be more susceptible to this propaganda about guns, that guns are evil, that guns are dangerous, this kind of thing. Even in Pennsylvania, where the same laws apply in Philadelphia as apply here. Philadelphia at one time tried to pass legislation that said that you couldn't open carry in Philadelphia, I think, but that has been superseded by the state legislature, so that the same laws apply in Philadelphia as apply to the rest of the state. I believe. And check your laws, all right? Check your laws. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not giving legal advice. A little line there. But it's about control that they want these cities to grow. So that's about that. It was a nice place to live when I was there. I don't know about now, though. Growth this decade. Washington, D.C. has been growing. It's up to 88. Washington, D.C. is up to 88,000. Wow. Yeah. Or they grew by 88,000. They grew by 88,000. Washington, D.C., I think, had a population of about 600,000. Its surrounding suburbs are more than 1 million, but D.C. itself is not a large city. Charlotte has increased by 120,000 people, Atlanta by 63,000, Miami by 62,000, San Antonio by 178,000. These are absolute numbers, not the rates of growth. All right. Okay. We're coming to the end of our broadcast, but let me just see if anything new has come in. Sometimes new headlines come in during these hours. Let's see what Fox News is putting at the top of their website now. Okay, Trump and Giuliani want access to Mueller probe info that lawmakers saw, Giuliani said. I've been avoiding sort of this whole Mueller probe because I'm tired of it. I'm pretty sure most people are tired of it. Okay, woman whose ex killed himself after acid attack learns her fate. Staffers say Virginia congressman used them as personal servants. See Sesame Street suing over raunchy Melissa McCarthy puppet comedy. Every right, Trump is behind Chicago cops protesting mayor who say they turned his back. And some of the Fox opinion here. Let's see. Intruder at officer's home turns out to be his brother, police say. That was under the headline, Cop Kills Cop. That's very unfortunate. Very sad for that. Second grader's essay goes viral. Says, I hate my mom's phone and I wish she never had one. Wow. That's an article that all moms should read. Pay more attention to your children, all right? And not to your phone. I hate my mom's phone and I wish she never had one. Second grader. Let's extend our time just a few minutes just to go through this. In Louisiana, second graders' homework assignment is going viral and making parents across the nation question if they spend too much time on their cell phones. Teacher Jen Adams Beeson wrote in a since deleted Facebook post that she assigned her students to write about an invention that they wish had never been created. She posted an essay in which one of her students picked the cell phone. I don't like the phone because my parents are on the phone every day. I hate my mom's phone, and I wish she never had one, the student wrote. All right. Yeah. Listen to that, all right? Not just moms, I imagine, but fathers too. Get out into the nature with your children. Get out into nature and your children this Saturday. It's going to be a warm day, so get out into the shady trees of the forest and spend time with your children, okay? Not just second graders, but teenagers and adult children as well. All right. Thank you for tuning in. And as I say, there's an open invitation to anyone who wants to come here on a Saturday and go through the news with me. Or you can call in by Zoom or other means we can discuss. Please contact me. All right. So God bless, Godspeed, and may His kingdom come.